Okay, we do have some time. We have promised to close the seminar at 5 o'clock. If you still have energy for the discussion, so let's go on. Who wants to have the first question? Please, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all very interesting presentations. And what I was wondering, I'm not sure if I can put it right way, but it seems that the life below water in the Baltic is now, we know a lot about it, and it is very well mapped, and also there are all kind of models. But I was wondering that actually this is for Johnny and Elina and Waltteri, and maybe also to Riikka. And what about our authorities? I mean, those authorities who give licenses, for example, to different actions in the sea area. Are they aware of this work, and how well, and are these results already used? This was my sort of, or also enterprises, how well they know what has been done, and where are the small spots that they can, for example, there is room for aquaculture or wind parks or whatever. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to start?
I can say something about the situation in Sweden, at least. The municipalities is quite aware of the data we have produced, and they are incorporated. We have, of course, a little bit problems to explain what is a value or what is of all these kind of underwater biotopes and things like that. So in that sense, going to the Mosaic, for example, we are trying to get the values for that very clear, or it can be very transparent, at least how it's done. But still we have this, I guess, we have the maps, and I think many of the municipalities are aware of it, and they might still have problems to understand what it's really containing, and that's I guess.
Very many of the municipalities in Sweden have actually read Mosaic when it was on a review. So, and I would say they got it very well. So. But another comment is, of course, all these maps are now produced in 2018. So also the Velmo data is now putting into maps, and so in the near future we should get quite handy data to use for all kind of.
Yes, great.
And I can say something from the Finnish side. So while we have been developing these models during the SmartSea and previous project, we have been trying to do this stakeholder involvement as much as possible. So we have been communicating with planners and asking what kind of information and assessments they would need and how these models could actually benefit them. And especially we have been cooperating with this Kymenlaakson-liitto, and they have given feedback for us, and also we have been trying to communicate that what does these model outputs actually mean, and how these planners could apply them. So the idea is that the planners should treat these lost ecosystem services and benefits as costs, and when they try to find these suitable locations, for example, when they consider these ice conditions in the allocation of offshore wind parks, and when they estimate the like the energy profit that they gain, they should add these lost services as costs. And if these costs are lower than the benefits, like the socio-economic benefits, like the profits and jobs, then these human actions could be allocated to these suitable areas. And I think we have had good communication on this matter, and sometimes it's understood and sometimes it's not. But that's like with anything.
Yeah. Okay, next.
Thank you also from my side. A follow-up question on this would be that will these maps actually solve the problems, or will they bring up new problems that were not foreseen when you were challenging and finding the data and mapping everything? Okay. This is a question for everyone.
Okay, who wants to start?
Well, at least in this work, actually, we did come up with some, well, you could name them as problems, because we realized that the Annex 1 habitats are not very well functioning in Finland, because we have so complex archipelago. And for instance, shores of islands are not covered in the Annex 1 habitats. So that might be a new problem that we didn't expect.
More comments or reactions to this? Yes, please.
I have maybe not the good answer, but we in Seagis project, in the end, we reached out to the big consultant company like Ramboll, Sweco, I don't know who is here in Finland, they are also, but otherwise, but because these people at these big consultants, they do the work for the companies, the EIA, like the assessments. So one way of getting into with data, with maps, is to reach out to the consultants, not maybe the municipalities, but and then, of course, you deeper you dig, you more problems you might end up with. But I think it's good tools that is now coming up.
One problem that I see is, of course, that we say more than we know. We say that we know that this is sensitive to this, but we probably don't have really a good idea, or we say that this is not sensitive to this, and there we have problems. So it's all the unknowledge we have, but since it's management, we need to do management from what we do know now, but we really need to be aware of it, that it's very little we actually do know.
Okay, next, Gary.
So this is all kind that is marine protected area. It's very new thing for me, and I have learned quite much today. It's really, and then when I learn, I then start to think. And one of the first idea, or the question in my mind is that who has really defined this kind of 10% threshold or recommendation? So this is, if I understood right, that is an international recommendation for the whole oceans. So my first questions to you, do you think that this 10% amount of the MPIs of the total sea area, is that valid for the Gulf of Bothnia? The second thing is that, in a way, if we are just looking at the numbers, that's really sometimes could be a bias. So if we think that, okay, we just need to reach that 10%, I think it's more important how large are the MPAs. So in a way that if you just have millions of areas and the area together is 10% of total area, that might not solve the problem. then the real question is what is the minimum area of which can be considered as the MPA? And then the follow-up of that kind of thinking is about the connectivity. So now we have a quite much of MPAs. How much we understand about the connectivity between the MPAs? Are they well connected now? Are they well, or are there some problems in a connectivity? So this is just my thoughts.
Thank you. Okay, this was not an easy game.
Well, there has been quite a few studies on how big MPAs should actually be. People have thrown around numbers like 10 square kilometers minimum, 100 square kilometers minimum, and if you go under, it's a useless area. There's been studies that say if you want to protect, for example, seals or in other places in the world, dolphins or sharks or something, you need a bigger MPA. But if you want, for example, habitats like reefs or seaweed areas, it would be more beneficial to have multiple smaller ones because of the connectivity and the dispersal of new organisms. So it all has to do with what you want to do with the MPA, because you have so many. There's so many different types, and you have to consider the goals, and you have to consider how much you want to do. In some places you have all these different goals, and they don't always go together necessarily. But your first question, considering the 10%, it's an interesting idea, especially because of Elina's results of with the graph and everything. But if you think about some other areas with, for example, the Great Barrier Reef, over there you should probably have more than 10%, whereas somewhere in the middle of nowhere, why protect anything if there literally is nothing there, or then areas where you don't know. It's complicated.
For me, I wouldn't say that the percentage is the hard question, if it should be high or low, or for me the problem is what should we have inside of these percent that we do protect, and how do we decide it? What things are valuable? So how do we decide what's valuable and not? And how do we decide what's need protection from human pressure and what doesn't? Even if it's valuable, it perhaps doesn't need protection, and so on. To come forward in that, and to have some kind of view that most people share, that this is what we want to protect. That's a quite hard part, and many steps and many things to think of, both biodiversity but also representativity and etc. And to have all these things in head, that I think is the hard part. Then if it's 9 or 15%, because many times it's 10% of things we don't care about.
Okay, I think Jaakko had a question.
Yeah, I have a question to Jonny. So in your presentation you mentioned that there is not that much interest for offshore wind energy in your area. And I'm asking you the reasons why the industry is not keen to push forward offshore wind energy.
Sorry, I don't hear you.
You can't hear? Okay. I have a question to Joni about the offshore wind energy. So you mentioned in your presentation that there is not that much interest in your area for offshore wind energy. So could you open us reasons why the industry are not willing to push forward offshore wind energy projects?
Of course, it might be the current cost of energy. Now it's have been rather cheap energy, so that might have been. But also we are building, at least on the Swedish side now, we are building a lot of wind parks, rather big ones, 100 or even 1,000 of these windmills on land, and it's much cheaper, and so the interest, we had asked a few companies, and have also have interviews, and they all pinpoint that it's still there is so much easier and cheaper to build on land. But then also, of course, the Kvarken area is a little bit special. We have the World Heritage, we have on both sides, and we also have birds crossing both from north and south and east-west. So in this area, it seems that might be so much problem. So don't at the moment no interest.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi, so I'm Henna Rinne from Åbo Academy, and I have a question mainly to Elina. I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the MPAs that your analysis suggested were located in northern Åland. There was actually like a cluster of them, and at the same time we know that this is one of the areas that it's least mapped. There is hardly any data from that area. So why do you think that your analysis suggests like so many MPAs to that area? Is it mainly because there's not that many pressures? Is the analysis like steered by the absence of pressures, or why is it?
Well, I think there are a lot of Annex 1 habitats, for instance, reefs and also underwater islets. So that's one of the reasons, and also the habitats were more weight in the process than species, individual species. And also, I think mostly there are no pressures in that area. And on the other hand, also some of the models suggest that those areas are important for algae that are hard, that are living on the hard bottoms. So that's one of the main reasons.
Okay. Yes, Marco.
Coming back to the 10% question, marine protected areas are not the only way to conserve nature. At least 3 or 4 fronts on which we should proceed. One is, of course, mitigation of eutrophication. Second is perhaps expand the network of MPAs by using prioritization. Third is improving management in the existing MPAs. And the fourth, which I think is most important at present, is using ecosystem-based marine spatial planning. And all these nature value maps that we have seen today, whether they be produced by Zonation or Mosaic or Helcom Hoops or whatever, they can also be used in impact avoidance, thinking of where human activities can be placed to avoid harm done to the environment. So we don't need to hang ourselves to the definition of MPAs, whether there should be more or less, but the key is just how we can avoid excess pressures from the most valuable areas.
Okay. Any reactions to this? No?
Agree.
Agree? Yeah. Okay, more questions? No? Okay, I promise that we close before 5. Before 5 o'clock. And I think we need to thank all the speakers. In addition, we need to thank the active audience.
Yeah, and we have some Sari, and then I think for the local organizations, there is Anne Holm. She's maybe not here now, but I think in this group, maybe Anne Savola also. And you three more and former more this workshop, or the seminar. Bring together the people, and it was so fantastic organized. So the big hand to you all.